Hey everyone, it's Pixelade here, and welcome back to the channel, your #1 source for life simulation, news, discussion, and speculation right here on YouTube. So it's been a minute since we've heard about Project Renee, since we've gotten an update on the upcoming life simulation, which by the way, we don't know when will be released. It's still in early development, along with other life simulation games, Paralives and Life by You, and now another name joining the list, Inzoi, which is being developed over in South Korea. So there's a lot to look forward to and learn with upcoming life simulation games, but today we're going to be talking about an episode from the One More Life podcast. I haven't actually gotten a chance to sit down and listen to the Sims 5 or Project Renee portion of this podcast, which isn't a very big portion at all. I definitely urge you guys to go and listen to the whole thing. We're only going to be listening to and talking about the Sims 5 or Project Renee portion. Sim Guru Lindsay does talk about some other things on this podcast. She goes into detail on games she played growing up and what inspired her and what it's like being a part of the team. I'm curious to know what she's going to reveal about Project Renee or The Sims 5 though, as we learned sort of recently that the game is going to be free to download, which definitely raises a lot of concerns. Games that are free to download are usually games that are just riddled with microtransactions and DLC absolutely everywhere. And honestly, it makes sense why. The initial game is going to be free. How is this company going to be profiting? What I can totally see them doing is throwing absolutely anything and everything behind a paywall. Even things that you wouldn't think to pay for are probably going to be behind a paywall. We also know that there is going to be some sort of multiplayer aspect, and I believe Sim Guru Lindsay talks about this more, but we're going to find out in just a minute or so. One little quick note before we get into this, I noticed at the very beginning of the podcast, the guy that's interviewing her actually referred to Project Renee as The Sims 5 and not Project Renee. And of course, when the interview started, she never corrected him or anything. I'm not saying this is direct confirmation that it is in fact Sims 5, but I was kind of having some doubts, like what if this actually isn't Sims 5? What if this is some sort of spin-off, like an in-between phase between The Sims 4 and The Sims 5? But I don't know, guys, she didn't correct him and he explicitly said The Sims 5, which I thought was very interesting. So of course, without further ado, let's get into this and see exactly what Lindsay Pearson, VP of Franchise Creative, has to say about Project Renee or The Sims 5.
In terms of the future of The Sims, obviously kind of each game kind of grows and changes and goes on its own journey, but you have now announced, there will be another Sims. It has a cool code name.
Project Renee.
Where did that come from, the name?
We chose it because Renee is reminiscent of words like rebirth and renewal, and we really wanted to take it, we wanted to pick a name, like a code name to start that sort of reflected the fact that we're really keeping the heart of The Sims intact, but trying to think of new ways to bring it to players and to offer things you haven't seen before in The Sims. So that's kind of where it came from, is like, ooh, how do we really rethink some of the core foundation of what it means to play The Sims.
I'm really hoping it is rebirth and renewal, because I don't know about you, and this just might be a personal opinion from me, but a lot of the stuff that we're hearing, I'm not personally against the multiplayer. I like the idea of it as long as it is optional. Again, it needs to be optional. You need to have the choice to go in, play single player, or go in, play multiplayer, have your friends join in, you guys build together, play together, furnish together. There needs to be an option. As long as nothing is forced, I don't see a problem with that. But if we're talking free to download, microtransactions at every possible corner, it's not sounding like rebirth and renewal to me. It's sounding like hospice care and death. But that's just my personal opinion. I just don't see how The Sims can possibly go in that direction and be successful. But honestly, I could be completely wrong. Judging by what we know so far, far, it seems like they're really following in the developmental footsteps of games like Fortnite, for example. That's a free-to-play game, but there's a lot of stuff in there that you can go and buy. Of course, you don't need to buy it, but they're going to really push that stuff on you. I'm sure there are going to be pop-ups throughout the game. Well, if you want to do this, you need to spend this amount of money, or if you want that item, spend this. If you want this interaction, spend that, you know? That is, in my opinion, where I feel like the Sims franchise is going, based off what we know so far.
Am I right in saying one of the things that has kind of been teased about it is that it will have more of a kind of social multiplayer kind of element to it, or am I just saying things that have not been? It's hard to tell sometimes.
No. Yeah. No. We definitely want to introduce multiplayer, and not multiplayer in the big scary jump in a world full of strangers kind of way, but literally how do you and your friends want to do some play together? And there's a lot of different flavors that could take, so we're exploring a lot of different spaces there, because playing together can look like so many different things, right? Even our chat now, we've talked about trivia games to fighting games to racing games. Like, playing together and social can mean so many things. And so we're having a lot of fun exploring all those different opportunities, particularly within the context of The Sims, because it is still about these little characters, their little lives, and you helping guide them. So what does that mean if you and I do that together? And how do we figure out how to make a little bit of that chaos, a little bit of that fun, and a little bit of that positivity all come together in a way that feels Simsy?
I think this will work, again, as long as it is private lobbies and private sessions, inviting friends. If you can imagine a world in The Sims where there are public lobbies, public sessions, anyone can join in and do anything or say anything in a live chat, or if there's some sort of open mic feed, it is going to become very toxic very fast.
Animal Crossing is a good example, right, of how you can have your own world and do all your own thing, but also you can invite people in and have different experiences together, right? And the other one, very different thought, was going back to what we were saying about, people torturing their Sims for whatever reason they've justified themselves for. You could almost have like an asymmetrical kind of horror thing, like some person's trying to kill off their Sims and the other person's like trying to rescue them or something.
Well, I think that's exactly the kinds of conversations that we're having, which is super cool. And we talk about Animal Crossing all the time because it is such a good example of my little space, my little island, but I can invite you over. And we've seen throughout the last few years of Animal Crossing, people inventing ways to play together, even that the game doesn't specifically support, but they've made up scavenger hunts or whatever, which is amazing. Or people who hosted talk shows on Animal Crossing, I think is incredible, right? And then I think you're right, that other end of what is the playful way we can play together. We actually look at a lot of games that are doing multiplayer in clever ways, like Among Us even, which is this sort of mystery thing, but you have to talk about it and solve it. Like, oh, what would something like that mean? Or like your example of sort of like this horror game, but what is the Simsy version of that? What is the reason that like I could be trying to do something, I could be trying to get my Sim ready for a specific thing, and then you might be able to come in and mess it up somehow or help somehow, right? I think that's exactly the kind of feeling that will feel right for me playing with like my close friends. So yeah, we'll definitely have more to talk about it in like future announcements and shares and whatnot, but that's exactly the kind of stuff we're exploring. Like, what if this would feel fun and Simsy, and how do we make it still feel like your characters and your space and your stories, and you can still do those things, but you want to share it with a friend or let them come in and help somehow.
Okay, that makes me a little happier. I personally have never played Animal Crossing, and I know, go ahead and judge me. I didn't jump on the bandwagon when I probably should have. That was a pandemic staple for a lot of people, and I was going to buy a Switch, but they were sold out everywhere. I couldn't even dive into that, but I was interested, I wanted to, so I don't really know exactly what the multiplayer aspect of Animal Crossing was like, or just the overall premise of the game itself, but it seems like they're taking a lot of inspiration from that, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, especially if there aren't public multiplayer sessions. If that is all about privacy and having private sessions, just friends joining in and doing things that way, I think multiplayer will probably end up being a lot of fun in Project Renee.
In terms of like from like the tech standpoint, are there things now that like more powerful consoles, more powerful graphics cards and stuff are out there? Does that kind of open doors to what you can do from like that side of things?
I think tech is always a really interesting facet of The Sims, because it's never been, and it doesn't need to ever be, sort of cutting edge tech. That's not the kind of experience it's going after, but it does unlock more power for us, particularly in the space of user content. So the stuff that players can create, right? The more powerful your computers and tech can be, the more powerful your creation tools could be, because now the game can run them when you've made a million different edits and a million different changes. So how to continue to celebrate and highlight like player content is definitely a big topic for us, and technology is unlocking a lot of possibilities there in the kinds of tools we might share, the kinds of ways they might be shared with each other through something like the gallery. Like, how far can we push that, right? How much control can we give, and how do we integrate it into our experiences? We've done some really fun experiments over the years, even with things like voice commands, right? How could you leverage that to search a catalog or make something cool? And of course, since everybody's doing it now, we've done little prototypes of things like, how would I use AI generation to imagine what an object could look like or something? And there's just a lot of experiments. I have no idea how we're going to apply them yet, honestly. but like, we, just like anyone else in the real world, our team gets super excited about new tech and is always trying to find a new way to leverage it. So even if we don't know it today, it's always an opportunity. As an example, historically, we do these sort of game jams every so often, and it wasn't necessarily a new piece of tech, but it was certainly using the code in a way we didn't intend. One of our engineers built a like first-person camera view in Sims 4 that now we use all the time, because you're like, oh, that's just like a thing we never thought about. And it wasn't necessarily that it was like a new tech unlock so much as like, oh, let's think about this in a different way than we had before. So that's like an example of how we did it before, but that's the kind of stuff that'll happen. Someone will discover some cool application and then we'll be like, oh, this is actually really useful.
I can say that definitely has me excited. You know, we're in the future now. Technology has advanced so much now than it did from when The Sims 4 was being developed. And we know with the way that The Sims 4 was being developed, it was originally being developed as an always online game. And thanks to SimCity's absolutely horrendous launch, things were definitely changed with that. And we got a much different game than they initially planned. All I gotta say is Project Olympus. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But technology has advanced so much since then, and we've already seen from previous reveals exactly how flexible Project Renee is going to be in terms of accessibility and when and where you can play it. They've already demonstrated that you can literally start building and furnishing an apartment and then just pick up on that same exact project on your phone. Like, you could walk to the bathroom, get on your phone and continue building or furnishing whatever you're doing, and then get right back to it on the computer again when you walk back into your room. I like the flexibility of that, but of course that also brings concerns for limitations. If I can access all the tools that I was using in the game from my computer also on my phone, that also makes me question exactly how detailed are these tools going to be, because obviously mobile tech definitely isn't as advanced as, you know, actual high-end gaming computers. I guess this is just something we're going to have to learn more about and see with time as they develop and share progress with us.
And even like at the player's end of it, the loading times, like when you've got it installed, so we play on console, when you have it installed on the PS5 versus on your hard drive, it's like, whoa, it's like the tech is getting so much like better at, I don't even know the right words for it, but you know, pulling it all in so much quicker. Like,
yeah, that's always the fight, right? Especially with a game like The Sims that can just grow. There's just, I mean, again, there's kind of no limit to what you might want to add. So it's just a matter of how do we keep making it fast and optimized for play, and how do we make it not make your machine slowly smoke because it gets too overloaded. We continue to try and always push ourselves to do more representation of global cultures, to do more representation of the way people might want to tell stories and play. And honestly, I'm so proud of us every time we do that. Anytime we add it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Like, we did that. It's there. It's real. And people can now look at this and say, oh my gosh, this world reminds me of where I grew up, or this feature finally lets me build the character the way I want to be built. And that's just such a good feeling to know that this thing that we're putting out into the world under the guise of a video game actually has so much more meaning for a lot of our players. So it's not like one specific thing, but that philosophy, I'm just very proud of having built up that muscle over so many years, and that it's something that the team all up and down the chain is just so committed to, and trying to figure out how to keep making The Sims connect with everybody. There's really something for anybody who comes into The Sims, and I just love that.
I'm gonna go ahead and give them 10s where 10s are due. I think they're definitely on a much better page when it comes to, you know, representation now than they were a while ago. And, you know, for the first couple years of The Sims 4, that was lacking 100%. And now, of course, we've got the skin tones. We're getting more representation in terms of worlds and stuff. I will say, though, I am disappointed at the fact that the whole fight for skin tones kind of really blew up over larger white creators speaking over it, when Black Simmers have been asking for these things years prior and were ignored. So I want to bring that up because that's also very important too. It does disappoint me that it took large white creators for them to do something when those concerns were being expressed for years beforehand. Aside from all of that though, we are in a much better place with representation now than we were 10 years ago in The Sims. And as far as this relating to Project Renee, I want to see Project Renee or The Sims 5 to launch with all of this stuff at first. I don't want to see skin tones being added in later on down the line, and I wouldn't expect them to do it, but this is a standard at this point, right? This game needs to launch with the representation that we've waited years for in The Sims 4. That's not just on skin tones either, that's also on the pronouns update and cultural representation as well. A lot of those updates we've gotten over time with The Sims 4. All of that stuff needs to be in the base game for The Sims 5. And I think I'm also a little concerned knowing it's going to be free to download, knowing they're likely going to have so much behind a paywall. I do not want to see those types of things behind a paywall. If you thought waiting a couple of years or several years to get representation in the game in a free patch update was bad, and they somehow introduce stuff like that as paid DLC in Project Renee, I think that is going to be objectively worse. Even if you aren't waiting as long, that's not stuff that you should have to pay for. Pronouns, skin tones, in the base game for free at launch, I'm not accepting any other way.
It's quite an honor, and I'm just genuinely proud of all the work the team has done to figure out these really challenging problems and make sure that we're being as respectful and representative as we possibly can in any of those spaces that we explore. And we bring in lots of experts and we talk to lots of people, and I think we've done a good job. There's always more work to do, but I love that it is such a part of our DNA to keep pushing ourselves.
So that's it. They didn't really go into too much detail. We didn't really get too much info. We just got a little taste, but of course, I wanted to share this with you and also just discuss it a little bit. What are your expectations for The Sims 5 or Project Renee, especially in terms of multiplayer and how you want that aspect of the game to be sculpted? Are you okay with multiplayer? Do you want to see private lobbies, private sessions with your friends? And in terms of content available at the start in the base game, how much exactly do you want to see? Project Renee is going to work differently than other Sims games, and Lindsay Pearson has given us more detail on this in the past. For example, in Project Renee, there could be weather included for free, as example, whereas previously that would come with a season's expansion pack, but you'd have to pay for things like very specific activities. I think she mentioned something along the lines of ice dancing, for example, so that's kind of a good baseline to go off of with predicting how content could be rolled out with Project Renee in the future. Another example that I can think of that they could possibly go for is not really putting pets behind a paywall, giving you cats, giving you dogs for free, but then if you want to have competitions or dog shows, you gotta pay for that. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but based off of that example, that's kind of how I see the rollout being, which some people are going to be a fan of and some people of course aren't. I think in my opinion that leaves a lot of room for a lot more microtransactions than we already see currently in The Sims 4. Share your thoughts on all of this below. Of course, thank you for watching, take care, so long, and happy life simming.